welcome back everybody to another edition of Preview and Predictions here on the Say What You Like Sports Podcast. I am your happy host, Philip Enriquez, and for those of you out there listening, probably wondering to yourselves, why in the hell is this dude so happy today? Well, it's because today is the day I get to talk about my favorite division in the NFL. I get to talk about the division with the most Super Bowl appearances in NFL history with 21. The division with the most Super Bowl victories with 13, and now the only division in the NFL where all four teams have won a Super Bowl. The Eagles have won one now, the Redskins have 3, Giants with 4, and the Cowboys with 5. So historically, this is easily the most decorated division in football. And in my humble opinion, I think it still remains not only the most toughest, most competitive division in the NFL, but for me at least, it's the most exciting division to watch. So before we get all into hating one another in the regular season like we're gonna, let's just take a second to just recognize how successful these four teams have been throughout their history. Now, let's get into the hate. I can't wait to read some of the arguments. I can't wait to see some of the name calling in the comments. So here it is, without any further ado. My breakdown of the NFC East for the 2018 NFL season. My prediction for fourth place in the NFC East, the Washington Redskins. Now, don't get me wrong. I think this is a really good team, and I expect them to be very competitive in 2018. But when it comes to the NFC East, I see all four teams in this division finishing within just a few games of one another. It's not like the first place team is going to be all that much better than the last place team. So it's going to be close. I see tiebreakers, not only in this division, but in this conference, playing a huge factor at the end of the year as far as playoff seedings go. Now, in the East, I believe that any one of these four teams can win this division, in my honest opinion. But age and injuries is what leads me to call for a fourth place finish for Washington. So let's get into the Redskins. Let's talk about the quarterback situation. The Kirk Cousins saga is over now in Washington, and the Alex Smith era has just begun. So one of the questions I've been being asked ever since the trade went down over at Anchor FM is, did they get any better at the quarterback spot? And ever since the trade, I've been saying the same thing. I'm really not too sure. I really can't call who's the better quarterback between Kirk Cousins and Alex Smith. The only thing I can say for sure is it's going to be very, very different at the quarterback position. Kirk Cousins and Alex Smith are two polar opposites when it comes to playing the quarterback position. Kirk Cousins isn't afraid to take the risk. He'll try to fit balls into tight windows, try to bring his team back no matter what the score is, where Alex Smith is a game manager. You've heard it a million times before for years and years and years, but you put a good defense behind him, you put a running game behind him, and he can get you far into the playoffs. He's not going to give you those fourth quarter interceptions in the red zone like Kirk Cousins was known for passing out here and there. So it's going to be different for sure. Colt McCoy's still the backup over there for 5 years now, man. And, he can play well in small stretches. At the running back spot, the Skins, they had high hopes for the second-round draft pick Darius Geis out of LSU before he went down with the ACL tear in the preseason. So that was a huge blow to the Skins. But in comes Adrian Peterson, who's now 33 years old. He's coming in to the rescue, and he had a really nice preseason game. And if healthy, you're going to notice that trend with this team. If healthy, I think he can still be a 1,000-yard back. At the wide receiver, tight end, pass catching positions, I think the real wild card, the real X factor here is Josh Doxson, the 2016 first-round pick. Because again, if healthy, he might just build upon the flashes we've seen when he's not injured. I mean, this dude only played 2 games with an Achilles injury as a rookie and was working himself back into shape in 2017. So I think that's the X factor. If he really steps it up, that's going to really help this Washington offense next year. Tight end, Jordan Reed, another if and when healthy kind of player. Because when and if he's healthy, he's a playmaking, Pro Bowl tight end. The problem with him, he's never played 16 games in any one season, and he only played 6 in 2017. You got Vernon Davis, the 34-year-old tight end, behind him, so they have a little depth, but he's far from a Jordan Reed. Also at wide receiver, you have the slot receiver, Jamison Crowder. Now, I think he's one of the better slot receivers in the game today. But again, his best ability is availability. He's only missed 1 game in 3 seasons, and that's something that not a lot of current Washington Redskins can brag about. Offensive line, I think this line is above average. It's an above average offensive line. But are you ready for this? When and if healthy. Because when and if healthy, this team boasts 2 Pro Bowlers. You got the left tackle, Trent Williams, and last season he played through a right knee injury. You have Brandon Scherf at guard, who's just another Pro Bowl player who struggled to stay healthy last season. The good news, if you're a Washington Redskins fan, is, hey, they're both healthy and both ready for Week 1. On the other side of the ball on defense, there's a youth movement along that D-line behind Jonathan Allen, the 2017 first-round pick. Now, again, he looked good when healthy, but the guy only played 5 games last season, so that's something he's going to have to work himself back from. The Skins, they drafted Daron Payne in the first round this year, so I think that's really going to help them because in college, he was tough inside against the run, and that's something that the Skins struggled with last year. At linebacker, they're solid. They got Zach Brown, you got Mason Foster, and how can I forget, you got pass rush extraordinaire Ryan Kerrigan. And now Ryan Kerrigan, in my opinion, as a Cowboys fan, I think Ryan Kerrigan's been way too underrated as far as pass rushers go for way too long. In the defensive backfield, you got the big star Josh Norman, who's turning 30 now. And last year's coming off a season where he had no INTs. But look, he can still take a number 1 wide receiver. He's still dangerous on the outside. Not too many teams will test him, so he's definitely an asset there in the defensive backfield. But I think this team is going to miss Kendall Fuller, who they traded in the quarterback deal. And he had 4 interceptions last season. He's now in Kansas City. And I think that defensive backfield will miss him. All in all, I can see the Washington Redskins anywhere from a 5-win team to a 10-win team. And as you've heard before, it all depends on if and when healthy. Because if and when healthy, this team has multiple Pro Bowlers at multiple spots. Last season, they all pretty much went down, and they still went 7-9. So if you can count on good health, and if maybe other teams within the division suffer from health, have some bad luck with health, I can see them winning up to 10 games and still in the division. But all in all, there's too many doubts. Too many players have to stay healthy on this roster that just have a long history of not staying healthy, and that's why I'm sticking with the Redskins in 4th place. I am predicting a 3rd place finish for the New York Football Giants. Now, I have quite a few question marks with this team, but my biggest question going into 2018 is just how bad or how inept was the former head coach Ben McAdoo? And look, I asked not to make fun of the Giants or even Giant fans for that matter. But if he truly was as bad or as terrible as we all think and say he was last year, then I think it's fair to say, expect the Giants to be back in playoff contention in 2018. I mean, why not? If it was the head coach that truly weighed this squad down, that truly had this team playing unmotivated, then I think the coaching switch could work wonders. Remember, this was a playoff team in 2016. And just to add to the narrative of the ineptitude of head coach Ben McAdoo, during his tenure as the head coach of the Giants, this offense never scored 30 points in a single game. That's bad, man. That's bad for an offense. And speaking of offenses, let's talk about the one that's going to be leading this offense, quarterback Eli Manning. So, if Ben McAdoo deserves most of the blame for the way 2017 went down, then how much blame do we place on Eli Manning? I really don't think anyone is really sure. I don't think anybody's really sure about Eli, but I know this. The front office, they passed on Baker Mayfield, they passed on Sam Darnold, and Josh Rosen. So they remain committed to Eli at least for one more season. Now, when you put a running game and a defense behind Eli, he's shown us in the past he can make big plays in the playoffs and get you over the hump. But it's been quite a while, and we've seen a long period of regression. So just a question mark in general, no matter how great he's been in the past. But I think one thing that Eli Manning has been missing during this whole regression period is a 1,000-yard running back in the backfield. The last 100-yard back that Eli Manning had was Ahmad Bradshaw in 2012, so quite a long time. But enter the all-world rookie, the number 2 overall pick, Saquon Barkley. I mean, this dude's blessed with 4.4 speed and just great size to go along with just talent, loads of it. He makes big plays on the ground. He makes big plays in the passing game. The Giants are hoping that Saquon can be for them what Zeke was for Dallas in 2016. He might just be that explosive player on offense that could turn it around in 2018. On the outside, Eli will have the highest paid wide receiver in the league, man. Odell Beckham Jr., who just signed a 5-year, $95 million deal. And look, he's easily the most talented wide receiver I've seen play since, I'll say, Randy Moss. I mean, he's capable of altering defensive game plans every week. My only concern with him is will the money and the celebrity furtherly boost his already huge ego that rivals Terrell Owens, in my opinion. I mean, he's got to stay grounded if he's going to be part of this offense and turning it around next season. At tight end, you got Evan Ingram, who's just as dynamic of a pass catcher as any at the position. He lacks strength as a blocker in the running game, so when he's out there, it's not going his way. But he's a hell of a pass catcher for sure. And then we got to talk about the O-line. The O-line. What can I say? It's a dumpster fire. The last couple of years, it's been nothing but a dumpster fire. But look, I think there's hope. It should be improved. They draft the guard Will Hernandez in the 2nd round, and they signed the Pats' former left tackle Nate Solder. The bad news, Giants fans, Eric Flowers is still your right tackle on that line. But look, they made some improvements. We'll see how they mesh. We'll see how they do. There's reason for optimism, at the very least. Defense on the other side of the ball, man. Snacks Harrison inside. I shudder thinking about that, man. He's a straight monster inside, especially against the run at defensive tackle. He's just like a wall along that D-line, and it's just never really easily moved, man. The linebackers behind him could be the strength of the defense this year. They acquired Alec Ogletree over from the LA Rams. He's a player. And then they're going to be playing Olivier Vernon as a stand-up pass rusher in this new 3-4 scheme, and just sounds dangerous to me, honestly. In the backfield, you got Eli Apple, who struggled a bit last season. We'll see if he could turn it around. But you still have Janoris Jenkins at corner and Landon Collins at safety, and they remain amongst the best at their respective positions. So I think all in all, best case scenario, some of the changes up front on the offense help Manning, kind of turn it around. Beckham returns back to his Pro Bowl wide receiver level, and Olivier Vernon breaks out defensively in his new role as a 3-4 outside linebacker, and they're back in the playoffs. I think at worst, the O-line changes fail to to really make a difference. Eli Manning he's done. He's probably benched again during the season, and I think the Giants are stuck in mediocrity or maybe even worse, maybe back at 4 or 5 wins. We'll see. This team is truly a definition of a wild card, in my opinion. My next prediction is a painful prediction, but I'm picking my Dallas Cowboys to finish 2nd in the NFC East this season, not winning the NFC East division crown. And it hurts. It really hurts. I just don't see it. Now, last season was a tale of 2 halves for my team. Almost seemed like 2 different teams to me from the beginning to the end. Because in the first half of the season, the Cowboys' offense was just straight humming along, averaging over 28 points per game. And then they lose Ezekiel Elliott to a 6-game suspension and end up averaging just 16 points per game for those final 8 games of the season. So, without a doubt, this offense has to get back on track this season. Now, you probably heard a lot about that offense. Dak, Zeke, the offensive line. But after spending some time up in Oxnard, over in training camp, I think we're going to be talking a lot more about the defense in 2018. But we will get started with the offense, talk a little bit about the quarterback position. The Cowboys fan base, they may be split on whether or not Dak Prescott truly is the franchise quarterback of the future or not. But the Cowboys front office, they're not tripping. They think Dak is their man, and they've put a very talented roster around Dak. Besides, those trivial things called pass catchers, a quarterback, they might need from time to time a nice wide receiver or a tight end to throw to, but unfortunately, there's not really a number one option on this team at this time. But at running back, without a shadow of a doubt, Ezekiel Elliott running behind a strong offensive line is what the Cowboys expect to be that magic formula that gets them back into the playoffs. And who can argue? Zeke might just be the best running back in the NFL, and when he's running behind, when at least at full strength, the best offensive line in the NFL as well. So, I just think it's a little bit risky that the Cowboys have made some cuts this year on the offense, and they're just putting all their eggs in the running game's basket. I'd like to see a little bit more balance, but again, Zeke is a beast. That offensive line, they're beasts. So it's also hard to argue with their strategy at the same time. Talking about some of those pass catchers, the Cowboys and Dez Bryant had one of the uglier NFL divorces in recent memory. And then, longtime tight end Jason Witten retired to call Monday Night Football games for ESPN. So regardless of if you feel like these might be additions by subtractions or good moves in the long run, at this point, at least early on in the season, I sincerely doubt Allen Hurns, Williams, Austin can really be a true number one option for this team. So when it comes to pass catchers, Dak's going to need one. So third round draft pick Michael Gallup, help me. You're my only hope. And let's talk about that O-line. And what can I say about this offensive line that hasn't already been said 1,000 times? It's often praised. They got 3 Pro Bowlers on, or all pros on that offensive line. But Travis Frederick, man, it's going to be a blow. He came down with the rare autoimmune disease, and it's currently holding his season in jeopardy. So depending on when and if Travis Frederick gets back, I think that's going to go a long way, especially since the Cowboys, like I mentioned earlier, have put all their eggs in the running game basket. So losing Frederick, that concerns me more than just a little bit. But like I mentioned, I think the defense is actually on pace to outperform the offense this season. I'm just thinking, it's been a while. If you're a Cowboy fan like me, you have not seen that in a while, where you're thinking the defense might just be better than the offense. But this year, man, there's some nice linebackers on this team. The defense remains pretty much intact, aside from Anthony Hitchens, the linebacker. He went over to KC. $9 million, man. He got paid. But you got Sean Lee, who's Sean Lee. And as long as he's on the field, he's the man. Jalen Smith, he looks good in training camp. He looks good. LVE's been hurt during training camp, but, anything he gives us will be a bonus this year. That's the way I'm looking at it. But even the former Green Bay Packers linebacker, Joe Thomas, shout out to Joe Thomas. He's looked real good in camp. On the D-line, Jerry Jones, he's finally found his war daddy, baby. He's been looking for that war daddy since the Cowboys departed with DeMarcus Ware after the 2013 season. So he found one in DeMarcus Tank Lawrence last year, 14.5 sacks. He's playing on the franchise tag, but it wouldn't truly be a Dallas Cowboys D-line without a dominant player who starts the season on a 4-game suspension, am I right? Do it the Cowboy way. Get suspended. David Irving. This guy, he's a knucklehead. But when he's on the field, he had 7 sacks in just 8 games. So that speaks for itself. And if Randy Gregory can stay off the weed, Stephen A. Smith, then he's a Pro Bowl talent. And if he can't, then he's probably out of the league. So again, it's a big difference there, but I think Randy Gregory can be a difference maker if he stays clean this year. And I really like this defensive backfield. And if this D-line can live up to its talents, I think the young DBs are going to continue to improve. The 2017 second-round draft pick, Chidobe Awuzie, man, he looks primed to me to be a Pro Bowl corner this year. Chris Richard, he really likes Byron Jones, moved him over from safety to the cornerback spot, and he's been looking good, at least in camp. Jordan Lewis, I really liked him last year, but, as talented as he is, I think he may not fit the scheme. Rashard likes those big, lengthy cornerbacks, and that's just not Jordan Lewis. I don't think it's what he's looking for. As far as the safeties go, you got to like Jeff Heath, but Xavier Woods is currently injured with the hamstring injury, and we really don't know what Xavier Woods is yet. So hopefully, I think with all this money against the cap the Cowboys have, I'm hoping they can pull off that trade for Earl Thomas. I think that would be nice. I think that really set this defense up to be one of the best in the NFL this year. And with all the question marks on offense, after losing Dez and after losing Witten, I think you got to put your eggs on the defensive side of the ball this year. That's just me. Now, best case scenario for my Cowboys this year, I think Dak Prescott takes a big step forward. The offense bounces back to like 2016 form. Travis Frederick, say he only misses a few games. And I think the defense is going to improve. Sean Lee stays healthy, and they might just steal this division from the Eagles if a few things go wrong from them. And as far as the worst case scenario goes for my Cowboys, I think it goes the running game can't carry the offense, especially with Travis Frederick's injury. It's worse than we think, and his injury really hits us just as hard as Tyron Smith's injury did last season. Dak Prescott doesn't take that step forward, and the defense gets hurt. Sean Lee gets hurt. LVE stays hurt, and I think the Cowboys end up missing the playoffs. But maybe if they miss the playoffs, it'll be a small consolation prize, because I don't think Jason Garrett can keep his job unless he gets this team back into the playoffs. But who knows? It's just one Cowboys fan's opinion. Finishing off my predictions for the NFC East, winning the crown, begrudgingly I have to say it, it's the Philadelphia Eagles, the Super Bowl champions from last season. And as much as I hate to admit it, when 31 teams fall and you're the last team standing and you win that Super Bowl, there's nothing left for me to say about you, right? You're the man. You did it. And this team, man, they did their thing last season. And as far as 2018 goes, man, yeah, there's some question marks. They took a few losses, but they come back and they made some key additions that I think are going to really offset a lot of those losses. For instance, they added defensive end Michael Bennett to an already stacked defensive line. And they added Haloti Ngata inside at the defensive tackle. So that strength in the D-line is getting even better, even deeper. And they add wide receiver Mike Wallace, who I know he's past his prime, but, they were saying the same thing about Alshon Jeffrey a little over a year ago. And, yeah, he may not be a 1,000-yard receiver, a big-time wide receiver. He's no Odell. He's no Julio Jones or anything like that, no AB. But he made key third downs when they had to be made in big games, and that's all you can ask for. And Doug Peterson, man, he was keeping these opposing defenses guessing all year long and deep into the playoffs. And, it doesn't seem like anybody was really beginning to figure him out yet. So, going forward, I think if you're hating on or trying to hate on the Philadelphia Eagles, you got to really hope that they botch this quarterback situation, because as strong as the quarterback situation is, which I believe at full strength, it is by far the strength of this team. You have the Super Bowl MVP in Nick Foles, and I can't argue. I think Carson Wentz was on his way to being the MVP before he hurt his ACL in Week 14 last season. So the strength is the quarterbacks, but neither of the two quarterbacks at this time going into Week 1 are seemingly healthy. In fact, they have yet to announce a starter for Week 1. So your only hope is that they botch this quarterback situation, that neither are really healthy and ready to go, and they get off to a slow start. Because if they keep up the pace they were on last season, I don't think any of these other teams in the NFC East are going to be able to catch these Eagles. But this team can't just beat you in the passing game with Wentz and Foles. They have a strong running attack now. They traded with Miami to land Jay Ajayi last season. And, the old man, Darren Sproles, is coming back for one last season, and he's a great pass catcher out of the backfield. Really a nice change of pace back that I think is just going to add a whole nother dimension to this offense. The wide receivers, like I mentioned, Alshon may not be a Julio, may not be an Odell Beckham, but he makes big plays on third downs when he has to. And like I mentioned, they added Mike Wallace to go along with him. So with Wentz and Foles, they're going to get the job done as long as they're healthy. The offensive line. The Cowboys get all the press. They get all the headlines for having a great offensive line, but this Eagles offensive line is just as good as the Cowboys offensive line when healthy. Jason Peters, man, he's one of the best left tackles in the game, even in his old age, man. And center, Jason Kelce, arguably he's just as good as Travis Frederick. So when this team's offensive line is at full strength, it is amongst the best in the league. And on the other side of the ball, they got a badass defensive line. The Pro Bowl defensive tackle, Fletcher Cox, man. John Gruden's boy, right? He only had 5.5 sacks last season, but man, he's disruptive in the middle. He changes the game. You got to know where Fletcher Cox is lined up on every play. And like I mentioned, they made that defensive line even stronger going into 2018. At middle linebacker, Jordan Hicks should be returning. He had a badass 2016 season, but he didn't look too hot before he tore his Achilles last season, so we'll see how he bounces back. But, the linebackers, man, they were mean, making plays. Joe Walker was nice for depth in there. They're deep. This team is deep. That's the difference between the Eagles and the Cowboys. That's why I'm giving the Eagles the edge. I think they got better depth than the Cowboys. I think the teams are very similar talent-wise as far as starting lineups go, but when it comes to depth, man, the Eagles got them just about everywhere. Strong safety, Malcolm Jenkins, man. He started the Pro Bowl, man, and, he also started in the Super Bowl, so Malcolm Jenkins doing his thing. I've liked him since way back when he was a corner for Ohio State. Basically, man, the Eagles, it's pretty obvious. I think if they pick up where they left off last season, they're going to be the NFC's top team, and they can probably repeat as Super Bowl champs. The Eagles' pass defense, I think, is getting even better than it was last year. I think it can start to say the same against the run. And I think as long as Wentz gets to full strength by mid-season, I don't think there's much to worry about for this team. I think the worst case scenario is things just have to get off on the wrong foot for this team. I think Bennett, he might be missing the first part of the season due to some off-the-field stuff. Wentz, I don't know if he's going to be playing week 1 or Foles, so we'll see how they return from their injuries. But we'll have to hope that they regress. We'll have to hope a lot of defensive coordinators have figured out Doug Peterson, because if not, this team is going to win the NFC East once again.
The podcast you just heard was published with Anchor. Got something you want to say to the creator of this show? Send them a voice message using the Anchor app, free for iOS and Android.